You're watching Storyboard and we're at the Cannes Lions Festival, and the breaking news here is that the biggest communications company in the world has just got a little bit bigger. WPP announced that it would acquire digital agency Akqa, and Martin Sorrell joins us now on Storyboard to talk about this and a whole lot of other things. So
we
Martin,
call it AKQA, not Akqa.
Oh, it is.
Akqa makes it sound as though it's some sub-ocean sort of submarine.
I stand corrected, AKQA.
AKQA.
So how much bigger does that make WPP when this acquisition goes through?
It's about $230 million of revenue, but it's not so much, small but perfectly formed, as they say, and it adds about 1-2% to our digital revenue, so we'll now be up to about 31% of our revenue. So last year we were about 16 billion of revenue dollars. This year people are expecting about 17 billion. So it'll add 230 million this year. That's their forecast. But they really are, they are the leading independent digital agency.
And you've been wanting this for a while now, isn't it?
Yeah, we've been, persistence is a virtue, I think. That's on my shield as a knight of the realm. Persistence and speed. I don't think this has been very speedy, mind you. This has taken about 7 or 8 years, and we've had 3 bites at the cherry. Third time lucky, I hope. And we're very excited about it because it is a digital leader, and they apply technology very well. Very strong creative, very strong digital capabilities, confined to the US and the western part of Europe, the UK and Western Europe, not in India. Yeah. Announced in China and developing in China, announced in Brazil, but not there yet. So Russia, not there yet. So big opportunity. If you look at our strategy, new markets, as you know, new media, consumer insight, big opportunities to leverage our research, and then horizontality, trying to get our agencies to work and our client leaders. We have the 30 client leaders to work with them.
So how soon does AKQA get into India, given your focus in the BRICS and in countries like India?
Well, when Ejaz and Tom, the 2 leaders of AKQA, are ready, and they have their plate full at the moment because China, Brazil are 2 of the BRICS that they're focused on at the moment, but I'm sure Russia and India will come quickly. When they make up their mind they want to move, we will help them structurally and technologically get into those markets. As you know, we have, if you take India as an example, we now are up to 7,000-8,000 people in India, and we've added to our arsenal in India with Hungama, just recently with JWT. So a lot of exciting things, and we'll hit. I was just looking at the figures, prepping myself for you. We'll hit $500 million this year dollars of revenue.
That was the target, in any case,
that's
wasn't it?
That's what we said that we would like to do. It wasn't a target; it was a wish, and I think we're about 485 in the Q1 RF, and despite some of the uncertainties we're seeing in India, because as you and I were talking about before, life has changed, views have changed, but our business remains strong in India.
In fact, you've preempted me. You've heard about S&P's downgrade for India a couple of months ago. The S&P is calling India the first fallen angel.
If India is a fallen angel, I'd like to be a fallen angel.
Are you still as bullish as India as you've always been, given that first quarter GDP came in at 5.3%, the rupee is at the lowest against the dollar ever?
I wish our GMP had come in at that. Listen, I mean,
in relative terms, Martin.
With all due respect to the media, they have to earn a living and fill time slots and spaces and with speculation. I mean, it's like saying China has a hard landing. It's not a hard landing in our view. You could argue it's a soft landing or no landing. So every one of these countries in which we operate, of the BRICS, if Russia is growing at 4 or 5, we're growing at 10. If India is growing at 5, we're growing at 10. If China is growing at 7 or 8, we're growing at 14 or 15. Brazil growing at 4 or 5, we're growing actually more than 10.
So you continue to remain bullish and confident of all the aggressive bets you made on these countries?
Well, I don't think they're aggressive bets. I think they're well-educated bets. Because it's higher risk, higher reward. Clearly, if an economy is growing at 5, 6, 7, 8% or more, it's riskier than if it's growing, flatlining or even going negative, because the chance of rebound is much easier. Obviously, the bigger you get, and India has had many years of great compound growth rate, the bigger you get, the tougher it gets. We see that with companies, and countries are no different. I mean, I think one of the things that does surprise me was with the speed of the change in India. I was there only a few months ago, and I would say people were relatively optimistic. A lot of what I hear in its reported speech, I'm not on the ground, is a lot of concern amongst business leaders about what's happening in the Indian economy, what's happening from a government point of view.
What are your agencies telling you? I mean, they're telling you that you will stay on course to make $500 million out of India this year.
We are consumption driven. We were not investment driven. We have benefited by all those people rising up in India from poverty and becoming economically self-sufficient and growing. The growth of the middle class, and this applies not just to India, it applies to China and Russia and Brazil too. So we benefited from the growth of the middle class and the lower middle class, and that has benefited our business and benefited consumption. You look at China, the 12th five-year plan is about consumption rather than investment. It's about healthcare safety nets, social security safety nets, because that's the reason people save, is that they save for their parents' old age and their old age. And then finally, it's about services businesses. So you look at that 12th five-year plan as being a mandate or manifesto for businesses such as ours. So I remain very bullish. Listen, if we can't get the growth in Western Europe, or indeed in the United States, we have to get the growth in countries such as India. It is still, I think, the fastest growing democracy in the world.
So the fact that it has slowed down is not a concern for Martin Sorrell?
No, I mean, would I rather have faster growth? Of course I would. No, it's not. This is a marathon. This is not 100, this is not Usain Bolt and a 100-yard sprint at the London Olympics. This is about a marathon, and I still believe that China and India have been on the wrong side of history for a couple of hundred years, and I don't know how long being on the right side of it history will last, whether it'll be 200 years or a shorter period of time, but I'd settle for 50 to 100 years.
You mentioned that you would be happy in UK with 5% growth because technically it's in a recession, 2 consecutive quarters of shrinking.
Yes.
How much of a stimulus will the Olympics be? Because you've always said that events like the Olympics and the US presidential elections,
European championships we're going through at the moment, they usually add about 1%. But if worldwide GMP in real terms is going up by 3%, inflation by 2, making a total of money GDP of 5, and advertising remains the same proportion of GMP, and it's at depressed levels. That means the industry is growing at 5. We've said we're budgeting 4 this year. We'll do better than that we've done 5 in the first 4 months of the year. We think we'll do better in the Q1 RF, in our quarter 1 revised forecast. So, my view is that is sufficient for us to get our 50 basis points of margins, to add 2 or 3% acquisitions. AKQA will grow that fast. We reported 7% growth. It reported sterling for the first 5 months of this year, or 4 months of this year. So things are okay. Would I like them to be stronger? Sure, I would. But there has to be some cyclicality. It can't be just ratcheting up by a continuously same rate of growth every year. So, fortune favors the brave, and we think India is still top of the pops as far as I'm concerned.
The Eurozone, Greece has, I believe, just sworn in this week.
That's another big point. The issue for us...
Its new government.
The uncertainty is Eurozone. The uncertainty is Iran, Syria, the Middle East. The uncertainty is, people talk about hard landing in China. I don't think it's either soft landing or no landing. And then, of course, I think the microscope or telescope or binoculars start to focus on America after the American election, because people forget that America has kicked the deficit can down the road, just like we've tended to do it in Europe. Now, I hope we will muddle through in Europe. I don't think it's an option for Greece to come out of the Eurozone. I was pleased with the election result, but just like the 100 billion that's been put into Spanish banks, people said, now, what are the rules under this? And the initial market enthusiasm gets tempered very quickly. So I think it's the same with what we've seen with the Greek elections. We welcome the result generally. It means probably more stability, but it is a coalition. It is a very fragile coalition, subject to change.
Yeah. But
the rules have to be written, so long way to go yet.
But when you track what's happening in the financial markets and the sovereign debt crisis that's gripped the Eurozone, and then when you come to a place like Cannes, that doesn't seem to be in the air at all. It's almost as if the global economy fracturing or the financial economy fracturing in Europe is far removed from what's happening here. Is there a disconnect?
Well, Cannes is always a little sort of microclimate, isn't it? One of the things we have seen is that the luxury industry, until recently, has been relatively untouched. Yeah. And whether it's recession-proof or not, certainly although there are some statistics coming out now, for example, in Hong Kong, showing the luxury markets are a bit under pressure. We saw the Mulberry results, and their prognostications were not as good. But certainly consumers have become much more price conscious at the middle and lower levels, and they are concerned, maybe not at the high levels. And Cannes is a microclimate in that it is an upper
so it's
end.
not representative of what's happening in the rest of Europe.
The yachts and
But what about the advertising and marketing community who's here?
Well, I do think there's something you have to look at what's happening to companies. Companies' balance sheets are in much stronger shape than they were in September or October of 2008 post-Lehman. They've basically deleveraged. We see these statistics on CNBC and everywhere else. 2 trillion sitting on US-based multinationals accounts, 750 billion pounds, more than $1 trillion sitting on UK-based multinationals. Profits as a proportion of GNP all-time high, margins at all-time high. Companies deleverage, lots of cash. They're in remarkably good fettle. There is no lack of confidence amongst companies. What there is a lack of certainty and commitment. Average life CEO in America 4.5 years, CMO 2 years. So that makes boards nervous. Quarrels about compensation and the like make people more nervous. New rules about compensation that came in the UK or being put together in the UK as of today make people more cautious about events. So not a lack of confidence, a stronger underpinning, but people less willing to take the risks. Now, coming back to the point about the BRICS and Next 11, if I'm looking at an average growth rate there of 5, 6 or 7%, that's where I'm going to invest. AKQA, we're going to take into those markets. We're going to develop its digital capabilities because that's where the growth is. So new markets, new media, consumer insight, and this horizontality.
And this entire hue and cry about the BRICS slowing down and about India in particular.
Listen, the British economy should slow down like that, please God, right? So the American economy should slow down like that, please God. France should slow down. Projections. One of our competitors issued a statement saying, I think that the French television market or French media market was 16% down or whatever it was. Yeah. It was going to be down again this year, or Spain was 16% down. So please God that we should be in as bad a position as India or Brazil or Russia or China. And what we're looking for is the leadership in Western Europe to ensure that we are in the position. The leadership has to come from Germany. Yeah. Germany is the strong man of Europe. Poland and Russia are the strong men of Europe. And that's where we're looking for increase. This is this sort of irony that not only is the world moving east, but Europe, in my view, Europe is moving east too. That's where the power is. That's where the strength is. And if we're to get out of the Eurozone crisis or mentality, we're going to have to rely on Angela Merkel and the Germans to bail us out.
Two developments between this conversation and the last one we had. One is the Murdoch Corporation, the Murdoch Company, News International, News Corp coming under the scanner in the UK, the Leveson Inquiry that's going on right now. Politicians of every party getting paddled in public almost every day. Yes. Will there be a cleanup as a result of this?
Well, clearly,
and what does it say about British society?
Well, clearly there has to be changes. You can't have that sort of activity, and I think Rupert Murdoch and James Murdoch and everybody involved understands that. Clearly there was something wrong there. The News of the World was shut down, and I think you have to applaud their action in doing that so quickly and taking decisive action. The Sun on Sunday was launched. and has now become a 7-day newspaper. Clearly, there will be something coming out of the Leveson Inquiry, whether it's legislation, whether it's a stronger scrutinizing body or regulatory body. Clearly, you can't have parents of murdered or missing children having their phone hacked. I mean, it's just totally unacceptable behavior, and clearly
but the collusion between business and politicians and police, even, isn't that something that
I think politicians have acknowledged it was too close, and if you look at the pattern of activity, I mean, whether it's explicit, and when we all know there was something implicitly going on there. I think Leveson, my own view is Leveson has been going on for too long. There is too much sort of belly button gazing as a result of it. But I think some good things will come out of it. Whether it's, I wouldn't favour increased regulation. I would favour increased self-regulation. It's like our own industry. We benefit from regulating ourselves rather than having regulated.
Are you disappointed that Edelman got the business and not one of the WPP agencies?
Edelman got what business?
The News Corp business when this scandal broke last year?
No, we actually were working for News Corp, so I don't think your information is quite accurate. And of course we did the whole relaunch of The Sun, and News International appointed actually Team WPP for Team News. So I'm not quite sure where you got the information from.
But then Edelman got the business to handle the corporate,
No, we were doing it. No, that's not correct. No, we did the whole of the revamp and thing. So I think you have to check your sources. Maybe it came from Richard himself.
Well, he was in India last year. But moving on to the Facebook IPO.
Yeah.
What do you make of what happened? Not the NASDAQ glitches and all of that, but the fact that investors, were told that maybe their business model is not as robust as it was expected to be.
Well, I think IPOs put pressure on people. If you look at Mark Zuckerberg's S1, his letter to shareholders, he didn't talk about going public or the necessity of going public or raising capital. He talked about Facebook as a social purpose. You know what my view is, that it is a social network, not an advertising medium. As such, it's a long-term brand building medium, not a display or search medium. So expecting it to operate in the short term, I think, is a mistake. It is the best long-term brand building mechanism probably on the planet.
You don't think it was overvalued?
900 million people use it. So there can't be much wrong with it. It will become the third nation on the planet, probably will become the biggest nation on the planet. So there's something they're doing that's dead right. I wish we were doing as many things right. Was it worth 100 billion? Well, the market has spoken, and it's not worth 100 billion now. But this is a marathon. This is not a sprint again. And people, the trouble is, in this quick hit world in which you're responsible, you want the instant comment and the instant flip thing. The depth is the marathon. We're not in the business of sardines for buying and selling. We're in the business of sardines for eating. And I think this is fundamentally important. We at WPP, why were we interested in AKQA? Because we think it can be made into an even more successful digital brand. It's a long-term job. And this is come back to Leveson and everything else, that's about superficiality in a part. What we're interested in is in the long term and building brands long term. And this is the fundamental thing. And Facebook is really good at that. Yeah. It's not an advertising medium, it's a public relations medium.
You mentioned the scrutiny on executive compensation.
Yes.
You've been very combative in the past few weeks.
Been combative.
Defending.
I just wrote an op-ed, which some people didn't like, and some very interesting people did like it.
There's some interesting points you made there. One is that you felt that there was, proxy investor services were sort of discriminating against WPP or companies which were not based in the US, and also that this is a private company, a private enterprise at the end of the day. But given the kind of scrutiny that Jamie Dimon was in Congress, and while they were talking about trading losses, and yet his compensation came up. So in this kind of an atmosphere, what is the way forward for companies and executives?
Obviously there is a concern about inequalities. obviously there is a concern about relativity. My own view in the article was, don't tinker with the market mechanism, which some people didn't agree with, tax it. You know, ironically, what I was saying is, you know, the French model may not be, you know, if you think it's too much, don't mess about with it. I mean, the fact is the proxy services, ISS in this particular case, apply totally different standards to WPP than they do to Omnicom, IPG, and Publicis is not even included in it. And there's less transparency in a French context. If you look at the structure, I mean, there's been some criticism of the structure of our board. If I look at the structure of the Omnicom board, nothing against Bruce Crawford. He was CEO of the business. He becomes chairman of the business. I think he's 82 or 83. I think I'm right in saying, and you can check this, that no member of the Omnicom board is younger than 60, and most of them have been on the board for 5, 10 or 15 years. No mention in the ISS proxy of that. That is not right. If you're going to criticize, at least criticize consistently.
But
and it's
public
interesting.
Martin.
Hold a second. It's interesting that the EU are looking at the role, one of the regulatory bodies is looking at the role of proxy services and how they go about what they're doing.
What about public perception? How does one deal with negative public perception when with regards to executive and CEO compensation packages in an unequal and increasingly unequal world?
Unfortunately, this becomes a personal thing. But it is a personal. You know, I often use the Bill Shankly quote, you know, football's not a matter of life and death, it's more important than that. So is WPP. I started it with one other person, 27